I'm muted. We have quorum, but we do need one more because Matt is not a voting member.
Thanks, Nicole.
And we have quorum. Shayla's here, so we're good.
I'm sorry, Nicole, did you say, what did you say?
We have another voting member that just joined Shayla, so we are at 5. So we have 4.
Okay, great. Great. So let's go ahead. Wow, it's exactly 3 o'clock. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order at 3 o'clock. And Nicole, would you mind taking a roll call vote?
Not at all.
I'm attendance, sorry, not a vote on anything yet.
Becky,
Present.
Matthew.
Here.
Melissa.
Here.
Dr. Walker.
Here.
Shayla.
Here.
Patrice.
Here.
And we have Melvin, I see. From probation. Welcome.
Sorry, I'm here.
And Denise.
Yep.
And Christopher, and then myself, Nicole Popchak from Office of Reentry and Justice. That's everyone.
Great. Do we have any members of the public or anyone who'd like to make a public comment on anything under the purview of this committee? Hearing none, I guess we can move to our next order of business, which is the approval of action of the last meeting. Do I have somebody to call for a vote?
I move approval.
I second.
All right, I'm ready for
Great.
roll
Nicole,
call.
could you call a roll call?
Becky,
Approve?
Melissa,
I'll abstain. I was absent. Thank you.
Patrice,
I'll abstain as well.
Dr. Walker,
Approve.
Shayla.
Approve.
We don't have enough votes to pass, and I just wanted to remind folks that even if they weren't there, they can still vote yes.
Can I vote on behalf of the chief from last month because I was her proxy last month?
Sure.
I think that if Patrice, who's sitting in that seat now, gives proxy to you right now to vote, I think that that's okay. Or she could just vote, given your assurance that it reflects what happened.
Well, I approve of whatever vote Denise has to offer.
Well, I'd say yes, aye.
And I can change my vote to I as well.
Okay. Thank you. Motion passes.
Okay, great. So I am not looking at the agenda, but my recollection is that we are now on to the next item, which is the data provided. Is that correct?
Yes, it
Correct.
is.
Yeah.
Yes, it
Okay,
is. And
good. And Denise, I think yours is the first set. Is that correct?
yes, it is. And
Okay, do
it
we have
is-
any, are we supposed to ask for public comment before we
Oh.
move forward? Is there any public comment about this action or this item? Okay, hearing none, I guess Denise, could you move to presenting your data?
Okay, great. Well, this data is not unlike previous months. We had, hang on, I'm just pulling it up here. Thank you for the link, Nicole. We have on page, what is it, 5, it looks like. We have 14 intakes from last month, primarily young men of color. Again, no changes, substantial changes there. Average age is 16, from a wide variety of arresting agencies, and a wide number of offenses across the distribution of intake. The results of the matter, the majority are pending in either in custody or released, while there are a couple of courtesy holds and a couple of folks transferred out of county, also with a change of circumstances for the ranch. The average number of days in custody was 8 days for 10 of those individuals, and the average number of days between disposition and program entry is 2 days. The next slides starting on page 8, speak to the charges for those 14 individuals. As I've pointed out in the past, the PID is the individual ID number and reflects each line for an individual PID reflects an arresting charge. So among the 14 individuals, or the 14 intakes, there were petitions that were actually filed on 8 of them. And last month, Becky, you had asked me to confirm about what does no petition filed mean. And I was able to follow up with our probation staff. And given that this report is for the previous month of intakes, and given that we don't ask, or I don't ask for the data pool until roughly the 2nd or 3rd week after the end of the month, there's a very slim likelihood that these would be charges that would be filed at a later date. Now, there's always that possibility, I've been told, but it's pretty unlikely. Now, if I were pulling this data for you and it was maybe the 1st week following the end of the month, then that would be a different question. But at this point, all these are considered genuinely no petition filed, and with a slim likelihood that at a later date it would change. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay, I'm seeing some nodding heads. So fundamentally, with these 14 intakes, 8 of the individuals had petitions filed on them. So that was filing charges, basically a 57%. Now, when I disaggregate that by race, again, small numbers here, but 8 of the individuals, 8 of the intakes were of African-American descent. 4 of them had charges filed against them. So that's a filing rate of 50%. Of the Latinx community, there were 3 individuals, 2 of which had charges filed for 66%, and same numbers for the white population. So again, small numbers, but that's the distribution. Now, I've been asked by probation to ask about what the value is basically in reporting this data on a monthly basis. It is Probation staff is happy to share. They've shown that commitment for the last 6 months in monthly data. And it is an onerous task. And what I think the ask of this committee is it possible for us to reconsider the time period of reporting? Because if it is this onerous, and it's not serving an immediate purpose, is it possible to report on an annual or semi-annual basis, have the commitment to that, and then maybe report in a different format than this kind of format, and a format that is actually manageable and navigable by a data analyst to do some of these other reports. So I think the gist of it is probation's happy to share. We're not quite certain what the monthly purpose is. And our ask is, can we step this semi-annual reporting?
Well, I think that's a really great thing for us to discuss. And I would just say that I understand what you're saying. And I mean, I was just wondering if maybe quarterly might be a better way to start. But do other members have thoughts about that?
Can I back it up a bit, Becky? I'm still not clear, and this is really when it was brought to my attention, I'm still not clear what monthly data or even quarterly data tells us. I mean, other than just oversight and watching what's going on, is it that meaningful on a quarterly basis? And what we can say is, on average, and this is off the top of my head, we have somewhere between 10 and maybe 20, so maybe 15 new intakes a month. So on a quarterly basis, that would be 45 youth. Is that meaningful enough to do on a quarterly basis or 6 months? And so again, it does ultimately go back to, what are we looking for and how do we plan to use it?
Yeah, I mean, just personally, I think that one of the main goals of reporting this data out publicly is definitely for the sake of transparency and for to create a better understanding, both for the public, but also initially for this group, about what what the process looks like, and where, as you've done in previous meetings, so that we can kind of like examine where the disparity is in different points along the way. That's only one point. But I hear what you're saying. And I mean, I would be supportive of the idea of looking at it every quarter for sure. But I guess my only hesitation of saying like, we're going to look at it every 6 months is that that's a long time. And I think there's just more, I just would feel better if we went to quarterly right now, and then maybe reevaluate it after the next quarter or something, just because that's a big change to 6 months. That's just my
Well, I get that. And let me just say, from a, a technical perspective, statistically, 45 youth is not going to be enough to really assess clearly a racial disparity. Okay, so we're going to need more, but I hear you, and we will be able to do that over time. And I think ultimately that's where I'm going, is that if we look at this aggregated over time, we will get more meaningful data than what we're getting right now, which is quite honestly almost anecdotal, with 2 out of 3 Latinx youth that have petitions filed against them.
Anybody else?
So,
any members
yeah.
have any thoughts?
Yeah, I certainly agree that monthly is onerous and not necessarily productive. I would second Becky's suggestion of trying to go quarterly, at least initially, and see how we do with that. Recognizing that, quarterly is 2 times as onerous as semi-annual, but at least we'd have the data to take a look at. So,
Fair enough. I think probation would be really happy to, have some relief on a monthly basis, with the notion then that we can, possibly move in baby steps towards twice a year, once a year, and go from there. So.
I think especially right now because of, if I just think about the last year, I know what you're saying about it not being a big enough N in order to draw any conclusions, but we really don't need that much information to see the disparity in action because it's so great, so it's not like we're reaching to see that that's happening. And I do think that it's important for us to be looking at what you just presented, which is the next step along the way, which is how did these matters get resolved, right? So there's that. And secondly, I think, just knowing from looking at the school-based data that I have access to, there has been a much larger reduction in the white population than in students of color in the last 18 months. And unless we were looking at that fairly recently, we wouldn't have been able to see the way in which that looks, so that's, I think, my hesitation to go to yearly. That's like really a snapshot.
Sure.
Not really seeing how things are kind of being influenced by one another, but so that's kind of what I'm thinking. How does anybody else, any other members have any thoughts or comments about?
Yeah, actually, I do. I have a couple of thoughts on this. One is it's actually connected to the following agenda item after we go through the data reports that's in the agenda, which is presenting a request to the mayor's conference. And I'm not sure how the presentation was received by the chiefs, but if we're anticipating that it's onerous, or we know it's somewhat onerous from a probation standpoint, I'm just curious as to what's going to be the response then from other local law enforcement agencies as well. As also, I don't know, and Denise, maybe you could help me with this, but in terms of being able to then analyze the data across all the various systems, is it more efficient if there was the same reporting cycle among all agencies? So I believe the sheriff's has 10 days, it was booking data over a course of 10 days. We have monthly from probation, and then for the suspension rates, that's over the course of an academic year, correct? Yeah, so we have different timeframes among different agencies. And yes, we know it, so it definitely shows us, the disparity, but in terms of having it be statistically significant among all the different systems, is it imperative from an analysis standpoint to have the same reporting cycle?
And I can speak just for the sheriff's office, and I'm going to talk about the report in a couple of items down the road. But certainly, I think our department, and not speaking for the other police departments, but I would imagine they'd have a similar response, that monthly is very burdensome. So quarterly, or like Denise said, hopefully getting to a point maybe where it's semi-annually down the road for comparison purposes, we would certainly be on board with that as well, just from a work standpoint, which I can address a little bit further later on. And our report, that 10-day period, I can address that as well. But I think we would, our agency would definitely be on board with moving it to quarterly, and possibly even a further period out in the future if everyone determines that that's going to be valuable data.
Thank you for sharing that, Melissa. And one other thing I wanted to add was that in the event that we don't receive as much data as we like from other local law enforcement agencies, then it would be, the work on our end at ORJ to connect with DOJ to see what information we can get from that end, which of course has a lag time. So you may not necessarily get it on a quarterly basis, but maybe a semi-annual. So there are other factors involved that we may want to keep account of and ensure that there's some consistency in the reporting, just for the sake of fairness, because I do anticipate, right, when we bring this ask to other agencies, there will be a lot of questions about why one agency is doing it this way versus, all of that kind of stuff. So we want to be able to keep it clean and clear across the board so that we can get the kind of information that we want.
Yeah, thank you for all of that. I agree with the sentiment of what all of you are saying. Any other members have any comments or thoughts?
I pretty much agree with what everyone has said so far as like moving from monthly to quarterly. I think we should try to see how that works first, and then perhaps move into semi-annually.
Thank you, Shayla.
I
Good.
would just add that the purpose for trying to confront the various sort of minutiae that arise in turning this data over on a regular basis is based on your ability to respond, right? In the event that something looks like it shouldn't, and you need to make a shift, if you see that you are, there's some unintended consequence of a policy or practice or the development of a program, you don't want to have to wait too long or have a youth, say, in custody for too long before you can, realize that there's an issue and step in, right? So while to start, it certainly makes sense, particularly now when we are sort of reviewing this data, and I think people are getting more used to, hopefully feeling a little bit more confident and literate with looking at it and getting a sense of what it means. Makes sense to switch to quarterly, but we want to balance between frequency and relatively infrequent so that you can nimbly respond in the event that something comes up that you need to respond to, because you wouldn't want any person, period, young or old, in custody any longer than they need to be there if you find out that there's an unintended consequence or there's something that we can deal with some other way.
But is that this oversight body's role?
To make recommendations about?
Well, to monitor juvenile hall or custody on a monthly basis, and I would say adverse events. My sense is that, probation and the sheriff's office and the police departments have local or in department units that quickly address those kinds of things. I'm not sure, Chris. I'm just throwing this out there, and maybe Melissa, you and Melvin could speak to that a little bit.
Well, if I can, I want to add an additional point to that. Is that when we're looking at reducing racial disparities across these different systems, it's usually what's usually require or a response to that is sort of a change in departmental policy or procedure. So that doesn't necessarily mean that there is an immediate response. It's more of a system response that may take some time. Now, the amount of time, one can argue, what's the most efficient way to go about making some of those changes, so that way we could start to see more of a flat line when it comes to the distinctions and the different racial groups that are being affected by these different agencies. So I think that's something we really have to keep in mind. And when we're trying to do this for the sake of system change and to reduce disparities, it requires a system response that may not always be just, what's the word for it? May not happen as quickly as we think it should. And that's my understanding of the intent of this body, is to really look at how do we make an impact on the system itself, so that way overall we're seeing a reduction in disparities among the population.
I don't have any problem with that. I think the key is balance, right? So balance between, and I think this is basically what has been said. If we're balancing between, you know, once or twice a year versus monthly, at least for now, quarterly seems to be a pretty happy medium.
Is there any public comment about this topic? Okay, do we need to make a, do we have to agendize and make a motion to change that, or would it just be, can Jill tell us, or somebody who knows?
Good point. It's not an item that has a vote attached to it. So we could agendize it next month.
You don't need to. I mean, this is just a matter of what data you're looking for, and this has been an ongoing discussion. I don't see that there needs to be any motion. It's just direction to staff.
Thank you, Jill, our resident parliamentarian. Appreciate your input.
Well, consider staff notified.
Well, and I just want to say that I think that quarterly does make sense in a certain way, also because we are reporting out to the larger body every quarter about the work we're doing in the subcommittees. And so from that perspective, I think there's some sense to that. So, okay, great. So I think that is, Denise, did you have more to say about your data, or should we?
No, not about the probation data. I'm done. It's all yours. Take it away.
I have been providing this data from the school department about the special education English language proficiency information, demographic information, and I also would appreciate doing that quarterly as opposed to every month. So I'm right with you. But so that data is presented there for the month of April. So we're caught up at this point. We're just doing 1 month. The past few times I've been playing catch up, but now we are caught up. And so that data is presented there. So 23% or 3 students came in with an IEP, and only 2 students came in who were reclassified as English proficient. And just so people know what that means, it means that they were originally classified as English learners when they entered the school system, but somewhere along the way, they were reclassified as being English proficient, meaning that they've met English proficiency to be, to be proficient in English for all intensive academic purposes. So there were 2 students who met that criteria, and then 11 English only students who were admitted during the month of April. Does anybody have any questions about that part?
Nope.
Okay, and then the second thing that I provided was some information about suspension rate and expulsion rate for the county. And yes, this is a cumulative year data. We have looked before in this group at expulsion rates, but we hadn't yet looked at the suspension rates. And what I have presented here is a comparison about the racial and ethnic breakdown in terms of the rate of suspension and expulsion disaggregated by race and ethnicity as compared to the statewide rate for those same groups. And so on each of the pages, if you look on page 12, you'll see the information about suspension rate. And, there you can see the percent of students with 1 or more suspensions. The suspension rate overall is 10.5%, meaning that 10.5% of African-American students were suspended during the year. And then the next columns are actually like a disaggregation of that column. And so of that 10.5%, 62.9% were suspended only once, and then 37% were suspended multiple times. So just to be clear about what those 2 columns are, how the table is set up. So definitely, you know, compared to the statewide total, which is also, you know, disproportionate, you can see that the African-American students statewide their suspension rate was 6.8%. So 6.8 out of every 100 students were suspended at least once during the school year, versus in our county, it being 10.5%. So we are slightly more disproportionate than the state. And if you compare that to white students statewide is 2%. And for us in our county, the white students was 1.9%. So our white students are suspended at a slightly lower rate than statewide. I mean, almost identical, probably. It's not be significant. And then, but our African-American students are, you know, more disproportionately suspended than those in statewide. And then if you look at our Latinx students, you would see that statewide it's 2.5%, and in our county is 3.6%. So again, slightly more disproportionate than the statewide numbers. So before we move to look at the expulsion, does anybody have any questions about the suspension page? It's a little chilling that it matches the rate of disproportionate incarceration. Fairly similar in terms of the disproportionality. Okay, we can move to look at the expulsion rate. And I should say that, you know, our expulsion rate, I presented some data the last time we met, or maybe 2 times ago. And we're in the process right now of finalizing our triennial countywide expulsion plan that I've been working with the 18 districts on. And I'm also in the process of finalizing our triennial local control accountability plan. And one of the roles of the county office during that time is to coordinate expelled services for youth in the county. And so as part of that, we have created some metrics, and the metric around expulsion that we have created is to try to lower the overall expulsion rate for K through 6 students to 0%. So that is an aspirational goal. It's pretty low right now anyways. Let me pull up, I'm sorry, I should have included, I was still writing that part when I've written it between when the docket was completed and right now. So let me try to find the correct attachment to open up here. That's the wrong one. That's also the wrong one. I can share. I'm sorry, I'm working on my laptop and the screen is pretty small, so trying to find, here we go. Okay, so goal 5. Sorry, I'm trying to find the right place. Goal 4. So, like I said, the expulsion rate goal for, so it's a 3-year plan. So this would be for the summative data for 2023-24 is to have 0% expulsion rate for K through 6. And then for 7th through 12th grade, the goal that we've set is 0.05%. And so compared to what we are currently seeing as a county overall, that this is 0.5. This is a conglomerate of all the different age groups. So that's why it's not in the previous data that I presented, it was broken out by age band. But I can tell you that the 7th and 8th grade expulsion rate was 0.11, and the 9th through 12th grade expulsion rate was 0.09. And so basically we're looking at about, hoping to have a 50% reduction in the amount of expulsions in the coming 3 years. And that's going to be operationalized through the monthly, bi-monthly, we are kind of going back and forth, coordinating council that I facilitate of all the 18 school districts, director of student services. And so we plan to make it a standing agenda item in that group to discuss our data, to bring our data and discuss our expulsion and suspension data there, and also to, bring best practices and alternatives to suspension. So that is currently my action plan about that item. But I'm happy to get feedback from this group if there's anything that people are curious about or have ideas about.
Just acknowledging, I would imagine that for school year 2021, it will be non-contributory, right? I mean, you're waiting for the end of the year.
Yes. I mean, even this year, 1920, of course, includes 1 quarter of distance learning. So it's not necessarily the best representation, although it wasn't too different, to be honest, than previous years. But this year the data from this year is going to look totally different because students were not on campus for the majority of the year. And so there were definitely a reduction in the amount of suspensions and expulsions that occurred, for sure. I mean, I can say that anecdotally, but school year is not quite over, so we don't have any composite data, but I definitely agree with you, Dr. Walker, that this year is not going to be a normal year.
And Becky, is there any data that speaks to the reason for the expulsion or maybe the severity of that reason?
So I did present the offense reason in the last time that
Right. Okay.
and if you go to DataQuest, you can pull things and look at them in a more detailed way, but it is protected at a certain point so that you can drill down into the school to see the school that the expulsion occurred in, and you can look at the offense codes, the offense reason, but you can't look at those things against each other because
Right.
talking about 2 people were expelled here, and so they can't say 2 people were expelled and it was for this offense code. So that's only available as separate ways to decide.
Right.
It will block it from showing because of privacy concerns, but you can look by district by offense reason, and that's part of what we looked at last time overall. But you can drill down on the site by district, by school, or by district by offense code.
Okay, thank you.
And Becky, I just have a question with the data that is in the packet. So the suspension and expulsion, that's for K through 12 entirely?
Right.
Okay.
So the reason why I presented it by grade band before is because there's so few expulsions in the lower grade bands that it kind of like masks the rate for the older kids. And so that's why I did break it out in the other one. But you can't necessarily, I think the numbers are too small to break it out by district and by, it is available. It is available in a coded data file. And I did have our data person download it and look at it, but it's not easily, it's interesting because it is available, but it's all coded and you have to uncode it. And I'm not sure that that's, a good use of our time. We can see kind of the trend that's happening here, and, we're not trying to, we want to provide help with people to have alternatives, but we don't, it's not a witch hunt, so to speak. So,
Yeah.
and we're definitely working. The other thing that I think that has come up in that group is that having consistency. I mean, obviously there's always going to be differences in every community about how they implement, we're never going to have like a lockstep matrix that everybody follows. It's exactly like this. But I do think that especially working with those districts where they have a higher level of suspension and expulsion, to try to really dig deeper into some of those cases and figure out, kind of working backwards in a root analysis kind of way to figure out, is there a different, outcome that could have happened from this? And, like that group that I facilitate is a legal group where all the people are of the same sort of job class, right? So those people are all doing the same job in different districts. And so part of it is to kind of look at districts where they have built more restorative practices and see if there are practices that can be rolled out to some of those places where they're not quite as much a part of the community yet, if that makes sense.
So Becky, I have a question too. So the suspension rates and the expulsion, I'll just deal with the suspension rates. The suspension rate is that, sorry for the background noise, someone's watering plants and it's right out my window. So the suspension rates, is that based on, so the cumulative enrollment per racial group, Or the suspension rate is based on the cumulative enrollment of that specific racial group? Or is that against the total enrollment of all students?
It is controlled for their presence in the population. So meaning that the cumulative enrollment is listed there, but then there's the total suspensions and the unduplicated count of students. So that number, 10.5%, is an expression of the number of unduplicated students out of the cumulative enrollment. So it controls for the population. It's not the percentage of overall suspensions that are attributed to each one, but rather their proportional rate. So
And
one
this
out,
is what allows you to compare across races.
right, because otherwise it's hard to do that because the population sizes are so different, right? So that's why they express it that way. So it's showing that like 1 out of 10 African-American students was suspended, which is pretty significant, really. I mean, it's a pretty, like if you think about it, you have a class with 30 kids, that would be, if they were all African-American, that 3 of them would have been suspended during the year. That's pretty significant.
That's a lot, yeah.
It's a lot. But I think it's true. I mean, I think that's where we're at. I think that there is a lot of disproportionality in our school discipline. There's no way to make it look any, nicer. That's what it is. So that's where we're starting from. You can also break this down by gender, which is interesting too, when you go to the live link, so you can look at that. But what it doesn't control for is when people have different sorts of responses, right? So that's kind of the next level, I think, in a certain way. It's probably a really great PhD project, if I ever want to do that, is to look at like take individual scenario. There's the inter-rater reliability is not necessarily high because every school district has its own culture. Probably, I bet like Melissa probably could understand this from the sheriff department, like working across different municipalities, like there are different expectations for what happens. And that is definitely true. And a lot of it is historical.
What's the length of a suspension?
Yeah, so that's not handled by this right here, but normally most people have gotten pretty good about limiting suspensions to, a single day. There are a lot of rules that kick into place when you remove somebody for more than 5 days. But and that also is going to vary from place to place. So I know like for us in the programs that we run, I can't think of a time when we've suspended somebody for more than a single day. But that's just that's how we benchmark it, in other places, I think it to give multi-day suspensions.
And what happens with an expulsion? Are they assigned to another school?
Oh yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, this is kind of like one of these things that I breathe it like water. So I sometimes forget that it's not common knowledge necessarily. So when a student is expelled from a school, there's a whole process that they go through. They have a right to a hearing, and it's a whole pretty litigious process. And at the time that they're expelled, they're given a rehabilitation plan and a term of expulsion. And basically they then are placed, there are several different options. Basically in our county, most of the time they come to one of our county run schools, which is Golden Gate Community School. So that's a school that is specifically designed to serve students who have been expelled. But certain districts also run their own community day schools. Actually, maybe it's only at this point Mount Diablo who does so. They have their own community day school where they serve expelled students, but most other places send their students to us at Golden Gate. And then we also operate a school called Marcus, which is in Concord, which is a counseling enriched program, which sometimes students who are expelled, who have really a lot of special education needs, might be better placed there than at Golden Gate. And so during the time in which they're enrolled at Golden Gate, we are working with them to meet the terms of their rehabilitation plan, which might include things like getting community service, doing anger management classes, receiving a certain amount of counseling, different sorts of things. Every district does it slightly different, but in their expulsion paperwork, it will cite what are the things they need to do in order to meet the terms of their rehabilitation plan. And they also have to show a certain amount of attendance and progress in terms of making credits normally. And then if they meet all those benchmarks at the end of the semester, the staff from Golden Gate will meet with the district, and they have transition meetings, and they decide whether the student has met the terms of their rehabilitation plan and can be readmitted, or whether they need to stay with us longer to meet those terms. And then, but eventually everybody, the idea is that they should be able to be welcomed back into their home school after the term of that. The other thing that can happen is that certain school districts will stipulate expulsions, which is that they can make, it's like a suspended expulsion, and they say like, okay, this happened, and like, instead of going through the hearing and formally expelling you, we're going to make this stipulation that you're going to attend normally a different school so that they're not in the same setting. But it could be like, you know, between like, okay, you got, let's say you were at Mount Diablo High School, you got, you know, you did something that is an expulsion, but we're going to stipulate it, suspend it, and then have you go to a different school. Maybe you'll go to Concord High. And as long as you meet the terms of the, you know, the contract of like following all the rules and all those other things, then they will not act on the expulsion. But if you don't meet those terms, then they'll act on the expulsion and follow through with the regular proceedings in terms of that. But everyone is given a school placement, even when you're expelled from school. You're not expelled from school and then like just staying at home. That's not how it works. I mean, I didn't understand that until I started working in education myself either. But any other questions, Dr. Walker, or anybody else?
No, it was good. Yeah.
And the county, it's one of the county office's responsibilities, statutory responsibilities, to coordinate expelled student programming. And in our county, we actually run a school. In some counties, they just kind of like facilitate whatever the districts are doing. But for us, we actually run a school. And that's one of our statutory responsibilities, as well as to provide education in the court school setting.
I guess the most basic question is what's the relationship between suspensions, expulsions, and interfacing with the juvenile justice
Right. Yeah, that would
system?
be.
Do we have data about that? Or, yeah.
I'm not sure exactly how we could trace that, although that would be very, very interesting to look at. But I can tell you between suspensions and expulsions, that normally expulsion is a last resort, and unless there is something very immediate and egregious about the offense, a first offense will not result in an expulsion unless it's a mandatory expellable offense, which is, you know, constrained to a very specific group of activities. But normally it wouldn't be the first step. It is a progressive discipline sort of situation where if something happened, you would normally get a suspension. And then if there were repeated issues, then that might result in an expulsion. I'll have to think about that, Dr. Walker, if there's a way that we can make a trace between the different things. We don't, as the county office, we don't. Yeah.
Not necessarily our data, but are there studies that indicate that, you know, elsewhere?
Definitely. That's the school to prison pipeline. I mean, there are definitely studies that indicate that. But,
and we just don't have that data here. And it is something, though, I completely agree with you, Dr. Walker. It's something that I think that we need to have in our county, is a clear sense of that. And Becky, just to give you like a little heads up, we're getting set to have a data sharing agreement in place with Cal Policy Lab. And once we're able to do that, maybe we could have the criminal justice data linked with education data at their facility so that there's no concern about violating privacy. And maybe we could actually investigate that.
I don't know if they have student level data like that. Because what I was going to say is that we don't, as the county office, we don't actually even have access to all of the individual student records. Every district holds that individually. I have the student records for my own students, right? So the students of the school that I supervise the principals of. So for Juvenile Hall and for Golden Gate, you know, I mean, maybe another way to look at it would be to look at the past records of the students who are in the juvenile justice system, right? So that would be another way to look at it, instead of looking for the whole group, but looking at the people who do end up with that outcome, to look backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, that's another option.
For Golden Gate, we get a complete record of their discipline file when we get the referral for their enrollment. So those students Not every single student. We do actually accept quite a few students just through parent approval and through, like just parent choice, because it's a smaller setting with a lot of intensive services. And so sometimes people do self-select to come there. But, we request their entire disciplinary file when they enter. So that is something that is knowable.
Mhm.
I am curious about something. Is it okay if I ask now?
Please.
Okay. On the students that are expelled and end up in the day school, what percentage of those have either 504s or IEPs, or how many of them are identified once they hit you that they actually need more supportive services?
Right, that's a great question, and that is a knowable thing too. I'm thinking that maybe when we come back next time, I should bring, we put together like a data summary that shows a lot of different information about the school demographics, and it's like a multi-page summary of different things. So maybe I should bring that next time, and I think that will, it shows the districts, it shows the reason why people come there, and also shows it broken down by district. So where people are coming from to the schools, and also shows their special education status, and also shows that disaggregated by district. So it will say like X number of students with an IEP came from Pittsburgh Unified, and X number of students who are African-American came from Pittsburgh. So that information is knowable, and that might be something that would be a good next step to look at.
Does it also include which ones are identified once they hit you that maybe were not identified prior? I'm thinking if they've done something pretty serious and they're harming others, that they have some serious mental health issues that need, whether it be trauma or ACEs or whatever.
So that's a good point too. And there's another step in the expulsion process when a student does have an IEP, and that's that they have to have what's called a manifestation determination, because you are not allowed to apply the rules of school discipline, exclusionary school discipline, if the action is a result of a manifestation of the student's disability. And so when they have those meetings, it will be paired. Before you can go through an expulsion proceeding, you have to have a manifestation determination for a student to determine whether the behavior that led to the expulsion was a manifestation of their disability. So that's one level. To the other point, that is knowable information too, the number of people who are assessed and found either eligible or ineligible while they're enrolled at Golden Gate or at the court school. I would say that this year is probably, again, not a good year to look at, because my staff, through their collective bargaining agreements, were not on site, and we're not, it was a weird year in that way for a pretty long time, until April 12th, we resumed in-person instruction. So, but that is knowable information, and I could definitely find that and report like the number of students who were assessed while they were either at Juvenile Hall or in Golden Gate or the ranch, and the number of people who were found to be eligible. So I can certainly bring that. Any other comments or questions from the either the panel or from the public? Okay, so the next piece of data that we have is from the Sheriff's Department, correct?
Yes.
Okay, Melissa, are you gonna take that?
Yeah, I will. And Denise had attached a copy of one of the reports from our website, but I thought it might be useful if I can share my screen to walk everyone through where to find these reports, because they are just on our website. But I know that there's been a lot of discussion about getting data from the Sheriff's Office and various law enforcement agencies. There was a Chiefs meeting recently that I thought Chief French was going to bring up the data requests at the meeting, but it sounds like I was not in attendance, but it sounds like that did not happen at that workshop. So I don't have any additional information to report other than from my own agency. One of the biggest issues that we have with the request for data is being able to collate and gather the information that's needed. We do have some systems in place, one that I'll show you today that I think is at least a helpful start. I know that we've brought up ARIES in the past. Even using ARIES, we currently don't have a report in place with that system, and being able to generate a report is something that will cost. There is a cost associated with that, as well as staffing that we unfortunately don't have an abundance of, just like everybody else is dealing with right now, to go through the data and put it into a format, and also validate the data and verify that the data is in fact correct. So one of my thoughts was to take a look at the data that we currently publish on our website. And it's listed as booking data, but it actually was first put on our website to meet our contemporaneous arrest log requirement that we used to keep paper logs, and the media could come in and take a look at our paper logs. Well, a while back, we did put these onto our website. So let me see if I can share my screen and I can show you where these reports are. Okay, so can you let me know if you can see my screen? Okay, perfect. So this is just our Contra Costa Sheriff.org. This is our website. And if there's a few different ways that you can navigate to this, but the easiest way is to go to this How Do I tab, and it's under inmate reports. I'm going to click on this, and it says there's a link here. Click here to generate inmate booking report, incident summary report, or daily release report. So this is considered an in-custody report. And again, it is called an inmate booking report, but it actually is our contemporaneous arrest log. Now, there's some information on here, and I'll scroll through here. There is some data that is kept off of this report if it relates to certain domestic violence crimes, sexual assault offenses, or crimes against children. So the arrest location for those types of arrests, those penal code arrests, you won't see the arrest location. I know one of the things that probation offers is data by zip code, and the sheriff's office, and I think most other agencies, generally don't aggregate data by zip code, because like with us, we go across county. You know, there are some unincorporated pockets within cities or otherwise zip codes for like Walnut Creek or Concord. So if we were to go by zip code, it wouldn't necessarily correlate with the arresting agency. So we do often include a zip code in an arrest location, but that zip code could apply towards an arrest made by sheriff's office deputies or the police department in that agency, if that makes sense. This little introductory paragraph says that the logs will be removed approximately 30 days after they are posted. And I've made a few inquiries into our technical services division, and I was hoping to have some answers before today, but I still have some questions that I need to find the answers for, because our current report seems to only track data for 10 days. And that seems like something that we can certainly keep that data up for 30 days. And I will report back to this group on that. Because right now you'll see that this report starts with May 17th, and I think the last item is from May 27th, and it looks like the reports start from midnight or 0000 hours until 11:59 the next day, or 10 days after. So just to go through this information, the adult records do include names, their booking date and time, date of birth, their assigned a booking number, a bail amount if there is a bail associated with the charges. There's race, gender, their height and weight, hair color, eye color. If they list a job description, this is also indicated, at what time were they arrested? And there are a variety of reasons why there may be a difference between the time of the arrest and the booking time. That could be a period of time just to transport that individual into custody. There could be a time maybe that they go back to a station house for an interview. So there's a variety of reasons why those could be off by a matter of hours. Release type, if there is a release type and date, this one does have an arrest location. It talks about what the arrest is. In this case, it's a commitment. And you can see the charges here of 2 charges for DUI. So that is one particular arrest record for one individual. And then moving down, the next one here, same information. This one was a remand into custody. The arrest location is at the MDF, but this person was likely in court in Martinez, remanded into custody for 4 charges here. And then you can kind of scroll through the list and you'll see this one is a good example right here. There is no arrest location listed, and that's because these are some of the charges that prohibit us from releasing the arrest location because they are sex crimes and crimes against children. They fall under 2 categories. The one thing that this report seems to miss, and I think it's based upon when that information is pulled from our system, is if someone is booked into custody and released within a very short period of time, this report will not capture that. And so that's one of the questions I'm trying to get answered by our technical services division. I believe if this report is in fact pulled every night at midnight, then if somebody is booked and released between midnight of one day and midnight of another day, they do not show up in this report. So I am going to work with them and see if perhaps we can capture that data more frequently so that it would be inclusive of people that are booked and released within a short period of time. Are there any questions about this report or what it's showing?
Yeah, so this is a cumulative 10-day report. And does this fall off then and the next 10 days start online, or how does that work?
So what I've been looking at it, and I'm still trying to answer that question, but as I look at it, it appears that it falls off one day at a time. So it has a total of 10 days. So,
oh, okay, right.
So tomorrow, when we pull this same report, it'll start with May 18th. But
Right.
I believe we should be able to, since it does state in the introduction, we should be able to maintain the booking records for 30 days at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this data will have to be aggregated into, a usable fashion because it's, just single records and you can't see trends based upon just going through the list. And that's again where we kind of run into this concern about who's going to be able to pull those records together and how we can formulate them into something similar to what Denise produces for probation.
Would it be possible? Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Barker, please go ahead.
Yeah, just pardon my ignorance. Is this what we call ARIES, or is this just your own internal booking system?
No, this is not ARIES. This is actually part of our jail management system. So
okay.
we have a specific system for in the jail that tracks all of our booking and booking data, which is where this comes from.
Mm-hmm.
This does not track data if an officer gives a citation in the field. So if somebody is not booked into custody, they are arrested, given a citation and released with a future court date. This report does not capture that data.
Got it. Yeah.
I was going to ask Melissa if it wouldn't be possible to maybe extend this period of days that we're looking at, given that what we're looking at now is quarterly reporting, and to have an option maybe for some individuals maybe that sign in or have an authorization to sign in to access data for a longer period of time, such as on a quarterly basis or semi-annual basis. And then the other, if the other ask, and I don't mean to be so heavy on the ask here, but you know, as you point out, this data is not unlike the data that we prepare or that the probation department prepares for this body. And at some point, you know, it needs to be converted into some kind of usable format. And I wonder if it's not possible, again, to have an option, maybe for specific individuals to download this data in a CSV file for, say, 3 months or something, and maybe not make it available to the entire population, because I think it would be a heavy lift to support having that kind of access for the entire population, because then you would have to support it. But if we could get it in a navigable format for an extended period of time, I think this is very, very close to what we were looking for.
What is, Denise, what would be considered a navigable format?
For a CSV file is a comma separated file, and that is typically an Excel file.
Okay.
And we get those kinds of files from DOJ. We can download them as well, I think, from Department of Education, things along those lines. So it's a very common file that is easily translatable into another analytical tool.
Okay, I will certainly ask about that, because like I mentioned, there was a number of questions that I had about this report. And I imagine that at least as far as the extension period, that should be an easy fix. And I don't know the reason why it's currently limited to 10 days when it says the logs will be removed after 30 days. But we've had this system up in place for quite some time now. So whoever originally developed this Crystal report was likely, you know, not with our technical services division, but there's certainly folks that can go through and figure out where they're actually pulling that data from. And I will also ask about the CSV file or equivalent file.
That would be great. You know, I wonder if nobody has other questions about this data, if you could, oh, I see Cheryl has come up.
Yeah, it's a question, but it's also a comment. Good afternoon. My comment is this, that we've heard this a number of times now, that the sheriff's department or the police departments do not have the bandwidth to produce these reports or to culminate the data in a way that is usable for not only this committee, but for the public's viewing. And I just want to say that, so you know, Ms. Melissa, that this is the frustration that the community and the public has with the sheriff's department, with many of our law enforcement. And that as much as we are trying to work in coordination, collaboration, and cooperation with our law enforcement, this is the information we need so that we can better understand how we can work in collaboration. And every time we hear this kind of we don't have resources, we don't have bandwidth, it comes across as, well, we would like to do it, but we can't. We give a large portion of our city budgets, our county budgets, and our public monies to law enforcement. And I will say that this is why you hear so many people not wanting to give money to our law enforcement agencies, because then we don't get any information and any transparency to where that money is going in order to help us understand how better to keep our communities safe. So what I would ask for you to do is to go back and tell them that this is the one thing where they need to find the money to advise the public how to be transparent, how to show where people are and how they are being holding themselves accountable. This is not hard. This is no rocket science. If you can arrest people, you can show who's being arrested, when they're being arrested, what they're being arrested for, when they're being released, how they're being released, how they're being held. That is not rocket science. And to say that we don't have people to do that is not acceptable, and is not, and it's something that we hear all the time. And what it comes across is we don't want to do it. And so I will say to you that this data, because we know it's required in another year and a half. And so this data is needed. And I don't think we should have to jump through hoops, climb under fences, and beg for it. We pay for this with our tax dollars. And we shouldn't have to beg for it or ask for it over and over and over again. These files, whether it's CSD or XML is the other way that it's an Excel file that is manipulable. So that is information that the public is entitled to. And I am growing weary and exasperated for having to ask for it over and over again, and to give the same answers that, oh, well, it's either not available or we don't have the bandwidth. We have bandwidth to arrest people. We have bandwidth to put children in juvenile hall. Then we have bandwidth to tell the public where they are and why they're being held. I'm not one of those people who says that people don't belong in jail, but damn it, if we're going to arrest them, we have to tell people why, and we have to tell them why we're holding them. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Cheryl, I certainly hear your frustration, and you are not the first person that has expressed that frustration, and I understand that, and I am with this exact data that we're talking about today, trying to share the data with you and with the public that's needed. And we certainly deal with very frequent Public Records Act requests, and we go through the process and we constantly provide that data. So and I'm sorry that you feel that this has been just a continuous ask. Whether some of that has been with the transition from Assistant Sheriff Loudon over to me during this process, but I certainly do want to help provide the data in the format that's, like we were talking about earlier, that's comparable, so that we're comparing things during the same time frames, and we can compare, maybe not necessarily apples to apples, but make us as good of comparisons as possible. So I hope that as I get some of my questions answered on this report, and we can see what we can do to make this report more suitable for the needs of this group, that we'll be making some progress forward. And again, I can speak to the sheriff's office. I know we're just one law enforcement agency in the county, and I can certainly, by showing what we can provide, encourage the other law enforcement agencies to provide the same data as well.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Cheryl. I think that we are, Melissa, you have walked into this duty and to this team, and I understand what Cheryl is saying. It has been a while we have been asking and not feeling like we've gotten there quite yet, but I do think that what you're showing us today is a step in the right direction. And if we can just work with Denise and ORJ to maybe, explore with your tech people what sort of format would make it comparable, and also just kind of deal with the falling off, like how to retain it. And so we could get something for, a longer period of time. I think that would be great. And I appreciate your work on bringing this and on working on the other side to get it in a format that is, and at the same time, I want to acknowledge and validate Cheryl for expressing the frustration, because that's real too. So thank you both for participating with the best of intentions. I know you both are, so I appreciate you both for doing that. Does any other committee member have anything they would like to add about this item or questions for the Sheriff's Department?
Just a quick question to understand the confidentiality issues involved. Obviously, the arrest record is not confidential. Everybody's name is here, right? With regard to who's in jail at any given time, is that also protected information?
No, we do have a separate report. Let me see if I can go back, that has an inmate locator as well. And this is, the inmate locator is really for an individual search. So it's not going to run a report per se of everybody who's in custody, but this also on our website is, has the ability, but it's searching by name, or if you know the booking number. It's similar to what CDCR has for their website, where you can go on and search, but you have to know an individual's name in order to perform that search. Does that answer the question?
Right. Just saying that, obviously, as we move forward and have the Office of Racial Equity set up, and I'm sure it's going to be very data driven. Obviously, we have a lot of restrictions in health with regard to confidentiality, but the data we put out, we're able to break down by all the other issues of race, ethnicity, age, gender, et cetera. And so obviously it takes a fair amount of IT and analytics to do that. So, I mean, ultimately the goal would be to have kind of similar information from other aspects of county government with regard to who we're serving and what the breakdown is. So I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Dr. Walker, if maybe a good next step is, I don't know, Denise, if you and Patrice in your office would be able to come up with like a suggested file structure or something. I mean, I know it's going to be like people have to work within their own system, but also I think that, if you could come up with something, does that seem like maybe a good next step? Denise and Patrice?
I'm not sure exactly what you're asking for, Becky.
Meaning like as Dr. Walker was saying, there's like, I mean, I want to ask people for things that we don't need, right? That's not going to be, so like what are we actually looking for so that we can like get more concrete about filling it, if you know what I mean. So if we're just saying share your data, but then we want to have things that are meaningful. We don't want people to go to work to present things that are not
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's brilliant.
I want to say, I know you guys are not going to be dealing with all the data, but just because you are the first agency to actually be producing the data, that is why I would ask you, not because I have any impression that you are going to be receiving and working with the data. So I just want to say that up front, because I think maybe you're afraid that's what I was saying.
No. And actually my response, I have this question kind of regularly with our body here, is what is the research question we're actually trying to answer? And
Right.
So I'm going to put it back on you and say, I can give it my best shot. I can give it based upon my knowledge of the research literature surrounding the intersections with criminal justice and public health and health services, and I can put my lens on it. But the real question is what does this body want to get out of it? And what are we looking for? Because once we have those directives from you, then I would be delighted to help support, what that looks like.
And I echo Denise's sentiments, and just to be clear, ORJ is not going to produce the data. We will provide the evaluation and the analysis of the data that can be provided to us. In addition, it's difficult to do that sort of analysis when we're just getting raw data as well. So we would need, so to Denise's point, we would need direction from the body as to what specifically you all want to look at. What do you want coming from each of the agencies that you're requesting data from? We can provide guidance on how that will help for our evaluation purposes. But that's where we step in. There is a few steps back before,
Right.
based on what it is you guys want to really look at it and the kind of data, the way that you want it prepared for you from the different agencies. Because even if we get, let's say we get the CSV file from the sheriff's office, that's just raw data, and
Right.
that takes time and for us to do, sort of the analysis around that or trying to craft a little bit more cleanly what that data is trying to what that data will show. That's a little bit onerous on our end. So we want to focus a little bit more on the evaluation side of things. And in order for us to know how that, or in order for us to do that well, we would need clear direction, as Denise mentioned, with regards to what is the research question we're trying to answer here, what is the kind of data and how should it be prepared coming from the various agencies, and then we can take it from there.
So Becky, I would suggest that a good place to start would be my ask of the Office of Ed. That document that I sent to you on my my dream big goal for cradle to career sort of data infrastructure that includes all this, that might be a good place to start with regard to thinking about the kinds of data that we would want, because I've already gone through that thought process and documented it so that we could, and it's a part of our application for data from the DOJ as well as CDCR and the CDE. So I think that's a good place. It doesn't include health services data because I wasn't quite sure how we could go about that. But, just because it's tricky, but it's a start.
Yeah, Denise, that's great. Let's, so maybe we will agendize that next time and have a further discussion when we meet again.
Yeah.
What you've
Okay. Before we move on to the next topic, Melissa, if you don't mind, I want to put you on the spot again and ask if you wouldn't mind sharing the details that we discussed in email surrounding the RIPA data, and that, yes, the sheriff's office is reporting it, but that you have no access to it, because I think that's going to be really meaningful for this body.
Yeah, so I don't know how much information has been given about RIPA, but it basically that legislation required agencies to collect data, and the start date of that was dependent upon the agency size. So we are a medium-sized law enforcement agency, and so based on that, I don't recall the exact agency size guidelines, but we were required to start collecting RIPA data as of January 1st of this year. So January 1st of 2021. So DOJ will start publishing our RIPA data starting in January of 2022. So some of the smaller agencies in the county may not, and I can report back to this group if you want more specific dates for different agency size. But other smaller agencies will probably not be required to start collecting RIPA data until, January of 2022 and further out, depending on the size of their agency. When we collect that RIPA data, it goes directly to the DOJ. And there was several reasons why they did not want that data to be stored within the agency. They, for purposes of keeping that data as, I guess, altered as possible, that they wanted that data to go directly there. So when our officers enter in the data on a stop that they do, we don't, as an agency, we don't have access to the specifics of that data. It goes directly to the DOJ. I believe we might be able to see how many entries, and I can again check with our technical services division. I think we may be able to see that we've made X number of entries, but we don't actually have access to that data. But our data will be available in January of this next year.
Thank you.
Sure, yeah.
That's really interesting. So they've kind of blocked the LEAs from being able to see their own data to try to stop them from
Anything, right?
Yeah, which kind of goes to Christopher's point about, quick availability of data to be able to take action on it. And ours will be a year after.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so that sounds like we have a plan. We'll add that discussion to the next agenda that we have. And is there any other public comment or member comment about this data? Okay, seeing none, we can move to our next item on the agenda, which is to discuss presenting at the August Mayor's Conference meeting, which looks like is on August 5th at 6:30 p.m. Who has more information about that?
So that would be me. I am planning to reach out to our executive director, Gary, forgive me for forgetting his last name, to at least get a little bit more information on the logistics of that meeting. Supervisor Anderson so graciously made sure to, reached out to them directly and made sure that we were on their agenda. So I did receive Chris's presentation from the Chiefs meeting, and my goal here today is maybe to hear some feedback from you all to get a sense of what you would like to have captured in the presentation. And then we can bring back maybe a draft presentation before this body at the next July meeting. Gary Pokorny, am I saying that right? Gary Pokorny. Sorry.
You got it. Patrice, that's correct.
Deny.
Yeah, you're correct, Patrice.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so I'll get all the logistic information. I'll have that for everybody by the next meeting. And then if we can maybe just have some conversation today about what you would like to see in the presentation, it would really be awesome to have both Chief French and Tamisha Walker, who are both now co-chairs, be presenters. But in the event that they are not available, certainly have any member from or whoever you all would suggest in terms of committee members to present. I think that would be helpful as well. Now, keep in mind, this is a different audience. These are the mayors, right, in Contra Costa. So the presentation style and the messaging in your ask might, you may want to consider, that may be tailored a little bit differently from what was discussed during the Chiefs meeting. But I'll also open it up to Chris and Cheryl, who I know both attended that presentation, or who gave that presentation, or at least attended that meeting, to maybe give us a sense of what was the response and the feedback from the audience, and any lessons learned, so that way we could begin to think through how we want to tailor this presentation.
Thank you, Patrice. Denise or Christopher?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you guys probably have heard us talk a few times about sort of what the response was. I would say, in keeping with sort of the theme of this meeting, I think we sort of went in with a pie in the sky sort of ask. I think to keep it consistent with quarterly, which seems to be where we're going, as opposed to asking for monthly, which we were getting monthly from other agencies, so we were like, hey, at least we'll ask for it. We'll let you tell us something else. I think that would make sense, because I think that would be the first wave of pushback you get. It's like, whoa, every 30 days, come on now, this is a lot. So I mean, I think we're all willing to be flexible there, as long as we get the information we're looking for. The rest of it, I mean, I think you guys have all also heard me talk about race, ethnicity, gender, geography, offense, right? And wanting that level of information, because if we're going to be trying to support the development of programs when necessary, as well as policy and practice changes that may not result in entire program creation, but may otherwise have an impact, then we'll need that level of information to know how to structure one, right? How to build it, who should be eligible for it, all that. So, I mean, I think that those are my main pieces of feedback. Definitely some of the questions that we got, I think, were to some degree, or can be, bolstered by the level of participation we have potentially by the time we're in that meeting, right? If we have sort of borne out these sorts of questions and these sorts of discussions that we're having this meeting, and it's led to some level of compromise, some level of that collaboration that Cheryl was talking about, which seems like it's on its way to doing that. I think that could go a long way, right? To be able to say, hey, so this is what we're getting, not just from probation, but also from the sheriff's office, and we're not out to get anybody. That's always I think the most important piece of information you can give people, is that, and that's why I generally include so much information about how this group is formed and what it's for, right? Because we know what this group is meant to do in terms of looking at racial and ethnic disparities within the county, and trying to prevent those, trying to create solutions around those. And so that is the goal, right? It's not the goal to point out an individual or an agency and to say, it's your fault, but rather to say, based on what we see, we think it might be best to move forward in this particular way in order to have an impact that, brings things into a much more equitable state. And as long as I think we're presenting that information, I don't think you could really say that too many times in a meeting like that. I think the outcome, at least, would be decent. I also think, though, it's going to be important to do some, if I could use like a trial advocacy term, this is the point where I remind you guys that I'm a lawyer by training, some looping, right? Which just means when you hear people say things, you repeat those things back to them, right? Because we don't want to leave, kind of like we left last time, a little bit unclear about what exactly was happening, what exactly folks agreed to, when exactly we could expect something. So as people begin to make, to ask questions, or to make sort of mini proposals, or just throw ideas out, maybe we could do X and Y and Z, just whoever's going to facilitate that, saying, okay, so I'm hearing that perhaps we could X, Y, Z, 1, 2, 3, ABC. Does that sound right to everyone? Is that, how we should move forward? Is that our next step? And letting people respond to that, so that we come away with a more concrete, I think, interpretation of where we go next.
I appreciate everything you just said, Chris. I think that's really so wise. And, building on what Patrice was saying, I think that we do have to consider who the audience is here. And I think it's a little different than before, because before you were petitioning directly to the people who would be doing this. And now we're basically going to their supervisor, right? And saying, I want to talk to your manager. So from that spirit, I think the ask is a little different, because it's more to, I would think, to try to help them understand all the things that Chris just said. We're not out to get people. We're not, in the spirit of transparency, this is what we've been charged with as a body. And as the person who directs the work of these police chiefs, you're in a position to make that ask of them. And we're asking you to make that ask, right? And we would like a commitment from you that you would make that ask. So I think that's all really important. And I also just want to say that I think going to them with amount of, if we can get what we need to get worked out with the sheriff's department and come to that meeting saying probation and the sheriff's department are sharing this. And now we need, that is a much stronger position, I think, than to say just only probation. So Melissa, I see you nodding your head. So are you, if we can try to work out those kinks and get something so we can come there and say that in August, that would be strong.
Yeah, and I think we can certainly make that happen in that period of time. Yeah.
Great. That's really good to hear.
And, Becky, I just wanted to jump in. This is Jill Ray. When we reached out to the mayor's conference, Gary said that racial justice oversight body was already on the agenda for August. I'm so sorry. I don't know who got that on the agenda. I thought it was awesome, and they were, totally open, and we're expecting a presentation from the racial justice oversight body. So I think, and one of the things that Supervisor Anderson was a little concerned about was that this wouldn't be a beating up on the police chiefs, because it's not their authority. They work for the city councils. The city councils are elected just like the board of supervisors. So the city councils are the ones to determine whether or not, to share data, whether or not they have the capability of sharing that data. So that was sort of the idea, going to the police chief or going to the city managers, or I'm sorry, the mayor's conference. And to kind of give them an overview and like, this is what the county is doing, because many of the cities are doing this within their jurisdictions as well. Many of them are doing listening sessions. They're talking about social justice and racial equity. So it sort of brings it all together. And we've got a great relationship going with the mayors, with our community crisis response teamwork that we've been doing. And so it was really more about, I think, presenting them what's been going on, presenting them the kind of information that you all are looking for, so that everyone can make better decisions. Because, nobody wants the police departments to get beat up on. We all want to make a better system. I think that's the goal of all of this, is identifying gaps, areas that need to be improved, and all of that. And so that was sort of the idea when this whole thing came forward, to bring it to the mayor's conference, to do more of a sort of, here's where we are, here's what we're doing. Patrice is our new amazing director of the Office of Reentry and Justice, and is here to work with all of you, kind of thing. So hoping that it can be more of that tenor, than the police chiefs didn't give us the information we wanted, so we're coming to you, if that makes sense.
I hear what you're saying, Jill, but I also think that that's true also. So I think
I don't know that's true, because I don't know that the message got out clearly, and I don't know, I wasn't there. I can't.
Yeah.
But you're also speaking to a very different audience,
right?
Definitely. The sheriff is an elected official versus these police chiefs are all appointed.
Yes, thank you.
I would just say that what the point that Jill's made is really important, in remembering particularly that the process with the mayors and the city managers with regard to crisis intervention and the whole program has been going on for over a year. And maybe this particular introductory meeting with the mayors is not so much a specific data request as it is kind of an overview of what our RJOB is about, what the Office of Racial Equity is about, you know, what our longer term goals are, what our data needs are beginning to be, but not specifically so focused on ask for data at that meeting, and maybe just kind of enrolling them in the process of where we're at and where we're going. I'm just throwing that out there because it's a different meeting than was had with the police chiefs.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Walker. Cheryl, I see that you have your hand up.
I have it up because I find this very interesting that this has turned into, now we're going to go and we're going to play patty cake. No, I reached out to John Joya and I reached out to Gabe Quinto after the last meeting when we talked about the mayor's conference. And I told him what we were doing. And this mayor's conference, I go to every one of them. And they did talk about these stuff before. They know about the Racial Justice Task Force. They know about the Racial Justice Coalition. They know about the Racial Justice Oversight Body. And I disagree. You don't go to this meeting and just go in there and say, "Hi, how are you? We're here to introduce ourselves, and we don't want anything." No, we do want something. And as Rebecca just said, they are the supervisors of each one of these cities, chiefs and police officers. And we do want something. And they have the power to get us what we need. And I find it very interesting that we are charged by the people of this county to do this oversight body work. We are not charged to be in here trying to play nice because some supervisor, any one of them, I don't care which one of them, is afraid of that we're going to hurt the sheriff's feelings. I'm not here to play nice because of somebody's feelings. Now, I'm also not here to start trouble with a sheriff's feelings. I don't care one way or the other. I don't have a problem with the sheriff. I can sit down and talk with him, unlike other people. But I also am here to make sure that we figure out why we have such discrepancies for little Black and brown children, and why we have discrepancies in certain communities and other communities. That's what we're charged with. And I want to remind us that part of that is getting the data that we need. And when we have people blocking us from getting the data or making excuses for getting us the data, as we have for the last 3 years, we have an obligation and a duty to get that. And often we keep getting excuses, and we keep getting, I'm elected official, or I don't have to do it, and everything else. And that's what caused our problem when it was the task force and now the oversight body. So this meeting is being called. Yes, we go introduce ourselves. Yes, we can play nice and have decorum, but we also go in there with a specific ask. And that specific ask is, we need your help. We need to be collaborative. We need to coordinate, and we need to work together to find out ways to keep these children from being tagged and going into the prison. We need your help to find other ways to have these children be productive members of our society. We need your help to look at this data and find and identify trends so that we can steer them away from here. And we cannot do it by ourselves. This is where they come in. And to sit here and say that we shouldn't do that is wrong. Is wrong. And maybe it's because I'm coming from the aspect that many of these children look like my own, or my family, or people that I know. Because I have a vested interest in keeping our communities out of these jails and prisons and juvenile detention centers. I could just sit back and say, well, my children are fine, so I don't care, but I don't. And I think that some of you need to take a step back and maybe have some more interest in seeing these little Black and brown children out of this system. Because you wouldn't be saying this if these were your nephews and nieces and sons and fathers and daughters. Because this is wrong. This little soft shoe, tap shoe approach is wrong. Go in there and ask for what we need. The worst they can say is no.
Thank you, Cheryl. I agree.
This is Jill, and Cheryl, I couldn't agree with you more. And I apologize if you heard me say in anything that I said that either my boss was protecting the sheriff or that you shouldn't ask for data, because that is not what I said at all. And so I apologize for that if you heard me say that.
I think we have a good opportunity. We're going to meet again before this time. And so I'm glad for that, we can kind of digest everything that we've heard right now. And so Patrice, am I right that you are pulling together the presentation that will be brought there from our subcommittee?
Our office will be pulling that draft presentation together, and then we'll provide that to the subcommittee for the next meeting. But I'm hearing Cheryl loud and clear, and I do think it is important that we be very mindful of the framing of this, because these are, when you talk to the police chiefs, my assumption, and correct my assumption, anyone's welcome to correct my assumption on this one. When it gets down to asking them for very technical, to ask them to provide something that in their world, they're trying to think technically and operationally how they'll be able to do that. It's easy to kind of get caught in the minutia of that. When you're dealing with mayors, so to speak, these are folks that are to be, respond to communities' requests, respond to community concerns. And so I think the way that Cheryl has just shared about the concern of how the system is impacting our communities, our children, and things of that nature. How do we really articulate that out the gate through this presentation, connect that to the work of our job and how we got to the place that we're at, and then being very, very clear about what other questions we are trying to answer by having this data. And I think that will then prep the mayors to then go back to their police chiefs and say, this is really important. The community has come to us for this. We care about this. We care about why they want to do this. So can make this happen.
That was an excellent summary, Patrice. I appreciate that. And I think that that's exactly kind of what was in my mind, is that it is they have a different perspective and a different charge. And so I think that they can be influential if they understand what it is we're trying to accomplish. And so I think that what we put together should be focused on helping them understand the importance of what we're asking for. And I don't think that it's really, to Cheryl's point, we've been really patient, and I don't think that we need to walk around with kid gloves and not be, we don't need to be shy about the fact that we're asking for this, because this is our charge. Like, that is what we are here to do. And so there's a way to be clear and not be, it doesn't mean that we're going to be rude, but I think they deserve to know clearly what we need, and we deserve to be able to say clearly what we need, and we don't have to kind of sugarcoat it or make it anything different. Like, this is the time is now, and this is what we need. So I think we're moving. I really do think, I know it's been a process. We've been in this for a while, but many things have happened that have helped our cause, I think. And I think that it is a moment where I think we're going to have success in what we're doing in terms of getting the information. Now, of course, this is only the first step along the journey of so many things that have to happen, but it is a pretty big step to be able to have that transparency. And for people to know, I think it's important for the mayors to know that this, interdisciplinary, interagency group of people is paying attention to this. And it's something that we deserve as those, public representatives to have access to. So I appreciate all the conversation today. And we can talk more about how to agendize this for the next meeting. Denise, I see you have your actual physical hand.
Yeah, my actual physical, I don't mean to get into the weeds on this one, but this was some confusion for me surrounding, and this is why I asked Melissa to report on the RIPA data, because that's the stop data. So we have two kinds of data that we're talking about here. We've got the bookings data, which actually, Melissa, maybe you can distinguish between how that's different than the arrest data, but we've got that. We also have data from the DOJ, which is all arrests throughout the county. So it seems to me like unless we're asking each law enforcement agency to provide us what their arrests, we already have that. It's just in a different time period of time. And if we maybe ask them for that quarterly, that's one thing. But then asking for this, the stop level data too, that, so I'm not sure which one, if we want to say, well, we're getting the bookings data for last year from, you know, the public domain, DOJ, and we're supplanting that or supplementing that with the data that we get from the sheriff's office. If that's, we can say we've got all the bookings covered, or do we want to get more of that, and then also make the ask for those agencies that are working towards providing their stop data or RIPA, maybe they can send us that as well, because they are two different asks.
Right. So I think based, I mean, I'm not sure if that's the same for every LEA, but based on what Melissa shared from the Sheriff's Department, maybe they don't even have the power to send us that data. But I do think that is the data, the self-initiated call data.
Okay.
We learned recently what we, every LEA is responsible for responding to a 911 call. They don't have a choice, right? That's not discretionary,
Right.
but every discretionary choice when people, am I right, Melissa, and other people who do things, is that?
Yeah,
right.
You are correct in that. And the one thing I'll add, Denise, because maybe I was not super clear about this, the data on our website right now, it's a little confusing because it's titled as booking data, which it is, but it is contemporaneous arrest data. It is only for the sheriff's office and our contract cities. So it doesn't include booking data for, Antioch PD or Richmond PD. And the other thing it does not capture is arrests that do not end up as bookings. So that could be in the form of a citation. And especially right now with the emergency bail schedule, there's a number of arrests that were made during the pandemic that did not end up as bookings. Now, how that's going to change in the future, we will see if the bail schedule goes back to what it was, stays what it is, or maybe is somewhere in between. But so if an officer arrests somebody for a misdemeanor offense, like for example, a trespassing, they will write a citation, but they won't be booked into custody. So that will not show on the report that is on our website.
But that data is obtainable through the DOJ.
Correct. Yeah.
So we actually have that. It's just lagged by 6 months.
Yeah.
Or
so I do,
previous year.
Correct. And I agree. Once you have all of those components, I think you will have what you're looking for. The RIPA data though may be delayed, and I will get I'll get those dates and report back to this group at our next meeting of when different agencies are required to start collecting RIPA data and when their data will become available as well. Because they are going to be further out.
Did the sheriff's office do kind of some alpha testing of collection prior to going live with the state system? Because maybe other local law enforcement agencies are doing a test that we can draw on their data from.
So no, we did not do any testing. We did go to San Diego Sheriff's Office, who's a larger agency than we are, and they were required to start collecting their RIPA data before us, based on the timeline. So we did go and speak with them about the collection methods and the masks that the officers use, more of the technical aspects. But we did not do any test collections. We provided training to all of our staff that the training was don't quote me on this, but it was approximately in December, right before we started the collection. So it was pretty contemporaneous. And then as of January 1, we started that collection. Does that help?
Okay, yeah, I understand. That's great. Thank you.
But I don't know if other agencies are doing any kind of testing. I don't know. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So what I'm hearing in, Chris, your language of looping, what I'm hearing is that it seems like we have all the booking data that we need, even if it's DOJ data lagged by 6 months. And that we will have Sheriff's Office RIPA data come January 1st. With any luck, some of these other smaller agencies are getting on top of the RIPA data ask, and maybe you're starting to collect some of that data on their own, and that's the data that it sounds like we want. Is that correct?
I think so.
Well, I guess the thing is there's an assumption that the LEAs, they're pulling that data already to send to RIPA. What's the frequency again?
I don't think they're pulling it. They're entering it into
Entering
a
it
separate,
live.
Or they're entering it live.
in a separate system, right, Melissa? I believe that's what I heard.
Mhm.
But then they don't have access to their own data.
Correct.
That's right.
That's new information that we just learned today.
So, okay, I'm freezing here because I'm not quite, so at least for the purpose of this presentation, I don't think we want to get into the weeds of that necessarily. Let the mayors handle that with their own police chiefs. I do think we need to be we have to be very clear about the kind of data we want, when we want it, or when we need it, and how, and to share with them how we're planning to use that data to answer what questions. How they decide to work that out with the chiefs is a whole other thing, but I would think, correct me if I'm wrong, we would want a commitment from them about what they can provide to our job. Now, how they work that out in the background to make it a seamless process for them, since they're already entering data into RIPA, I think they should sort that out.
Right.
I don't think we need to get into the weeds of how they should do that for themselves.
And my only comment was that our ask is not for arrest records, it's for stop data, and that could be new for them.
Got it. Okay.
Because what you have already includes all of the different local agencies.
Every agency, every law enforcement agency in the county, in the state, reports directly to the Department of Justice on their bookings and arrests, and we get dispositions on them as well. So the only disadvantage is that some agencies are slower in the reporting. So DOJ waits typically 6 months for the release of the previous year's data. So I'm on their, I've subscribed to their listserv, and I will be notified when 2020 data is available on the DOJ website for everybody. So they want to give counties an opportunity to do some of their own assessments and make updates, because that's the other thing I think is there's some validation that goes on because a lot of organizations and the public use this data. So they want to make sure it's validated. So there's that 6-month lag.
Is there any plan to make the RIPA data that is collected available at the state level so that every individual county is not having to do this work? You know what I mean?
You know, I'm not sure what the state is thinking about with regard to the RIPA data. I would expect that the AG is going to do what they've done with the other criminal justice data and do some of their own reports. They've done one already, or I think that was done out of Policy Lab at Berkeley. some preliminary findings from those agencies who have already reported. And that was kind of fascinating because there were clear disparities in that data. It didn't include us, but they're moving in that direction to look at what's going on with the whole state, as well as allowing disaggregated analyses by county.
So you think that there might be a chance in the future that you would be able to receive a workable file about our county's data that was submitted from the state?
I'm pretty sure that's the expectation. In fact, we can download right now, probably San Diego's data. If they were the bigger sheriff's office, their probably data is available right now. So that could be an experiment to say, why don't we take a look at what San Diego's reporting and see if that is meaningful for this body.
I think that's a great idea. Maybe we could agendize that for next time and upload any data that's available so we can look at not only if it is, but also the file structure and how they're reporting it, because that could inform what we're asking too.
Sure.
Okay, I'm mindful of the fact that it is 4:59.
Wow.
Any further comment from the members of the panel or the public about anything else? Okay, well, that was our last item on the agenda, and Nicole wanted me to let everyone know that the date of the next meeting is incorrect on the agenda. It says the 22nd, but actually the 24th. I'm a little worried about that date and wondering if we're going to have a quorum of people. Do people know their schedule right now to know if that's a date that we can stick with?
This is Matt. I don't count to quorum, I don't think, but I cannot make that week.
I'm going to be joining you from the campground again, like I did last summer, because I am camping that week, but I can do it.
I'll be in a national meeting that week. Probably.
So-
ought to be.
Okay.
Melissa, will you be available next week or next month?
Next week or on the 24th, yes.
Okay.
Anyone else have a conflict? Okay, let's stick with it then, because I think even if Dr. Walker isn't able to join us, I think we'll still have a quorum if everybody else can.
Could you, before we adjourn, could you run down, just so I can make sure I have them all, the items that we at least verbally put on the agenda for next month?
I can give you my notes.
Yeah, and I can
The items, and maybe Becky, if I've missed things, the one thing that Becky, you talked about, I missed the details on, but you were going to provide more of a summary for the IEP.
I was going to give you our entire demographic end of year summary
report, and this speaks to Jill's question. Okay.
Yeah, I won't have that available for this year until probably August, but I can give you the year before so you can get a sense of what that looks like.
Okay. We were also going to discuss file structure, data integration across various bodies. And we were also going to discuss, kind of the early slides for the presentation for the mayor's conference. I would also like to respectfully request that we discuss the where we want to post the DOJ slides that we presented at the last full body meeting. We asked for input on where to post them and we did not get it. And
no, I noticed that afterwards. I went, wait, that was the one thing that didn't.
How did we get past this? So, so there's that. And then the DOJ RIPA data from San Diego.
And also that Melissa was going to work to see what she can get in terms of a workable file for.
Right, so we could get we won't, probation and you, Becky, will not report on data. Melissa, you can just give us a verbal update. Those are my notes. Did I miss something?
I will look up those RIPA dates for other agencies. I'll report on that as well.
That would be great.
I think you also are going to talk about the presentation to the mayor's conference.
Yeah, I think Denise briefly said that about looking at some slides, but we should also talk about what the structure of that is. And I wonder to learn more about, I mean, like when you said, somebody said that Chief Bisa and
Misha?
Tamisha were going to be presenting. Are they presenting for a different committee or are they presenting for us? Because they're not actually on this committee.
Right, it would, so my suggestion is to have them present because they are co-chairs of the entire body, but I'm open to feedback.
Got it.
Nicole, did we make the direct request or we just asked them to attend this meeting? We're volunteering. Possibly.
A recommendation, but they have not necessarily agreed to it yet.
Got it.
Yeah,
No, so I
yeah.
understand. You're saying as the co-chairs of the larger body that they would go.
Right, right. And because both, you know, Mr. Walker is a city council person.
Exactly. No, it definitely makes sense. I just wanted to make sure we weren't like stepping out of our lane by asking somebody who wasn't on our committee to do something, but yes, I think.
But if the committee prefers that a committee member do present, then that's, well, you know, whatever you.
No, I think
whatever-
because of the reason you said, because of, I mean, being an elected official and talking to elected officials, that certainly makes sense. And then, you know, Chief Bisa obviously can speak to the feasibility of doing it, being a police chief herself and already doing it. So that makes sense to me, but I just wanted to make sure, like I said, that we were not voluntolding people who weren't even in our group, that they were doing something.
Well, I think we probably need to get confirmation from the two of them as to their availability and can they, and or maybe invite them to our next meeting to participate in the presentation. And if they're not available, then maybe it goes to this body. And Becky, you are as our chair and eloquent about this. You know, maybe it falls on you and Patrice or something to speak about it, but.
Okay, well, we can, let's start by asking them because I agree with.
Yeah, I agree.
Presented. I just didn't want to, like I said, step out of my lane by telling people.
And I don't want to prepare a draft presentation if they have already something going on too. So, but it is our subcommittee's ask. So the ask itself should really come from us. So
That makes sense. Okay.
Miss Becky, I have a question.
Please, Cheryl, go ahead.
I know we talked about it a couple of meetings ago, but I haven't heard it mentioned again. But I would like for this committee to work with the Community Engagement Committee. We did, I don't remember when it was, Christopher, maybe you can help me remember, but sometime a while back, we did a community listening session. And I think that it would be good to take some of the data that we looked at last month and present this to the community and have the community know, because that data is really the graphics that was used that I know that Miss Denise is going to post somewhere. Mm-hmm. But I think that it would do this body good to have a session in conjunction with the community engagement subcommittee to present that information in that graphical form to the community and give feedback.
I would be happy to join the community engagement subcommittee and share those charts and answer any questions about them. I'd be really happy. And I would also really, especially as community engagement, love to get their feedback on where we should consider making it available for the public, which website. I mean, I have my own idea, but getting that would be really useful.
No, but I don't want it just to go to the subcommittee. I want us to work together with that subcommittee to present it to the community. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, that's what about. Okay.
Yeah, I think we should talk about that next meeting. Because she said, what should we talk about next meeting? And I'm saying, put that on the agenda to talk about next meeting and having an actual community meeting to talk about that. And to present that information in that graphical form, because I think when people see things in that format, it really brings to light the work of this oversight body.
Mm-hmm. I think
and what we are doing.
Cheryl. I would really appreciate that, and I think that it would also be important to make sure that we're, you know, capturing the voices of people who have been impacted and involved in the system themselves. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. Let's put that on the agenda. Christopher, did you get all that?
Got it. That would also be a good place to ask about where to post it. If you have community
Right.
hearing that stuff, you can ask people directly who hopefully would
Mhm.
look it up themselves and be able to spread the word based on, whatever recommendations they give to. So.
Absolutely.
Sounds good. Okay, I want to respect everyone's time and thank you so much for everybody's engagement. I am very proud of our subcommittee for our engagement. I've been in other, not necessarily, but other public meetings where it feels like people don't show up. But this team, we're pretty solid. We all show up. So thank you all so much for doing that. And I hope everyone has a nice afternoon. So let's adjourn the meeting at 5:08.
Thank you, everyone.
you.
Thanks,
Oh, and
Melissa.
the-
Okay, bye.
Bye.